back and forth about the topics that we're going to have in the future. So just go to Mike's profile and join the Discord. And then we are recording this conversation. So make sure that, whatever you say, you're fine with having it being recorded. And Mike's going to kick us off.
Yo. So, kind of pretty much summed that up. There's your disclaimer. We'll repeat it a couple times as we reset the room throughout this discussion. But yeah, I think everyone's gotten settled in here. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what to expect in the discussion, but I think the title of the discussion kind of speaks for itself. So why don't we just have Brennan and Riley, give them a chance to introduce themselves really quick before we get rolling over here. So, Brennan.
Yeah, hey guys, what's up? My name's Brennan. I work for a house leadership person who's pretty awesome and up there, and they, allow me to become knowledgeable in this sphere. So I'm really excited to be able to tell you guys a little bit about what happens behind closed doors. And I'm excited to do that with Riley, my counterpart, who happens to work for a Republican member.
Yeah, hey guys, my name's Riley. I've been on the Hill now for almost 2 years, and I think it's also important to note in terms of counterpoint, Brennan works on more of the comms and digital space, and I'm in more of the legislative space, so we definitely have different expertises in terms of what we do day to day, and then also we have members that work for opposing parties. But yeah, I work for a California Republican and my portfolio includes housing, labor, postal, social security, telecommunications, technology, science and space, foreign affairs, financial services, and small business. So I handle a lot of issues for the congressman and work on all of the legislative needs. So excited to tell you guys more about the background of Congress.
All right, dope. Excited to hear about it. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions. We've got a few that, we're going to ask for sure. About to get us started off. Before I do, just want to take a second to remind everyone, if you have a question, if you have something you want to add, just raise your hand. We'll have a queue that we're building up throughout this entire discussion. And as Connor mentioned again, this is your last reminder for a while. This is being recorded. It is going to go on YouTube. Do not say anything that you are not comfortable having on the internet. If you're not comfortable swearing, don't swear. I swear on the internet every day. I'm comfortable with it. So there's your disclaimer. It's tight. You guys don't take the time to tell me what we already know. We have more important things to talk about. So let's start off with a kind of light question. This election was nothing short of chaotic and electric, right? So what I'd love for y'all to do is just give us an idea of what things looked like behind closed doors as soon as Donald Trump shouted, "Voter fraud."
Riley, you start.
Okay, well, I can give, I think, an interesting perspective coming from the Republican side. I think the original claims were very, let's just see what happens in court. But I do think, honestly, I know this is supposed to be a funny question, but I do think that it did provide some, of a barrier and kind of distance between establishment and Trump Republicans. Whether or not it's public information or not is not, relevant here. I think it's more so a lot of people on the Republican side, at least, were a little bit more fed up than they had been in the past, and also realized that their, commander-in-chief was no longer a part of their party, so they could be a little bit more upset. But again, obviously not as much as, say, Dems were hoping that they would come out publicly against these claims. But I do think internally it was a big breaking point. Whether or not we come to see where that leads us, I think it'll take a little bit of time. But I do want to note that because I don't think that people really know that, and that's not really talked about, but definitely had some major impacts on the Republican Party.
I think for me, it was really, really interesting to watch, I guess, to somewhat be on the inside, but also the outside at the time. of watching what it did to Republicans, I guess. And yeah, I guess like Riley talked about, like seeing what that meant for the decisions that they were going to make and how they were going to speak to their constituents. And I think especially because it was obviously like this turnaround of all these elections and people were trying to define who they were going to be, I guess, in politics. And a lot of people had relied on Trump and his cult of personality to be able to get into office in the first place, right? So as soon as you have this person saying voter fraud, but you just ran on this entire campaign of being like pro this dude, now suddenly you have this issue of like, am I pro America or am I pro Trump? So, and I think that answer became quite obvious for some people, and obviously maybe behind closed doors was even more obvious, but perhaps to media, people not always, but many Republicans chose to err on the side of staying true to party rather than to the American people. Sorry to get a little harsh on that. But anyways, that, I guess, from our end, that's what that looked like. And I think it really, I don't think it was unexpected in any way, but I do think that it shot an extra rift through, at least on the Democrat side, of just, dear God, get this man out of office immediately. And I personally found that I was embarrassed for America for a really long time. And I found that this at least was like a bit of an opportunity to push back, I guess, for what we had dealt with for the past 4 years. Yeah, sorry, that's my answer to that question. Sorry to spark anything if you felt attacked.
How dare you?
Okay, second question. Do you want to ask Mike or should I go?
I'll have Connor go ahead and just ask that one.
Well, real quick, I think Dan might have something to add because he has to speak. If it's about like political discourse and you're about to go all like red or blue on us, try and hold off because, maybe not get offended. But if you got something awesome to add, feel free, Dan.
No, thank you very much. No, I'm not going to go red or blue, but I do have a question. In the post, I guess, Trump era, or the Biden, you want to call, we a downturn of the amount of troops that were being deployed and engaged in these endless wars. And I know, Riley, I kind of wanted to ask you this question because you said your specialty on the Hill was foreign policy. Do you see the drawdown of troops in Afghanistan and Iraq actually happening on May 1st? How does the congressman that you work for feel about the troops actually being pulled out of Afghanistan finally after 20 years of endless war?
I mean, I think...
Can I add a follow-up question to that?
Yeah.
And what is the reason to stay? That's all.
I don't know if I can fully give you a reason to stay, but I will say, I think a lot of presidents have tried and have campaigned and have spoken about leaving Afghanistan, so I will say that my answer is I'll believe it when I see it. That being said, I think there are definitely some promising, things coming out of Afghanistan in terms of negotiations. Those are obviously on a very, up and down. They keep calling them off and bringing them back together. But I think it's a little bit more promising than we have had in the past in terms of Noah's question and how and why we should stay there. I think people are just, military leaders are very cautious in terms of not letting kind of what happened in Iraq in terms of the rise of ISIS, leaving a vacuum is a big issue. I also think strategically, we have troops all over the Middle East. We're going to have troops all over the Middle East for a while. But I agree that this war has been going on for a very long time, but I just don't really have an answer necessarily of when we're going to or why we're still there. But, I'm not super optimistic that May 1st, that's what I'm on the way. Doesn't seem to be realistic at this point, but, I think we're definitely working on it. I think it has been really interesting to watch the influence of Trumpism and America First. Even in the Biden presidency so far, our foreign policy is definitely not come close to the, precedent set by previous administrations. And I think that has to do with a large cultural shift happening in America towards less engagement, less interventionalism. So I could see more of a political appetite for disengaging from those folks. And as we're going to say throughout the entire night, politicians really do listen and have not necessarily listen to their constituents and every single little person in the United States, but they listen to, the political culture and what's happening, at a macro level in the United States, and they do make decisions accordingly when they have the right political will to do so.
And I think what you said too in the beginning, Riley, is a great point. I know we don't want to dive too far down a rabbit hole on any given topic tonight, but we touched on this last week as well. When you go into a country like Afghanistan, and you mentioned with Iraq, the mess that happened there as soon as we left, you're really going, and we're the United States, so we're going and we're fucking shit up. And we're completely destroying the way of life that these people, have grown and become accustomed to and have known, regardless of if we agree with it or if, anyone would agree with it at all. You can't just go there, fuck shit up, and then leave, and then just leave these people on a point of, ruins. Oh my God! All right, tell us, Noah. Why do you disagree here?
So, I concur with Mike.
You just said you disagree.
Well, so not about the whole fucking waste of life up. I think that might be an exaggeration. You see, in my very shallow perspective and depth into this knowledge, but I do know that the Middle East has been desolate with an economy since for a very long time, right? Thousands of years, and quite often, as Riley pointed out, you don't want instability in the Middle East. Why? Right? It's a vacuum, as she said. Right? You leave. And then, these tribes or, militant groups kind of, pop up out of nowhere looking for some sort of leadership, looking for some sort of purpose, looking for some money, to back their initiative, whatever it is. And so, I think to kind of help answer Dan's questions, right, the reason you don't leave the Middle East is because there's a lot of influence, especially in the international stage, right, especially with the oil money, so on and so forth, right, and so the reason you don't leave is because the last thing you want is the instability. And the reason you do stay is to hold that political influence, right? It's very nice, right, to show your tanks, right, to show your muscles. And I think that keeps them at bay.
All right, so we got a lot to unpack here tonight. So if anybody doesn't have an additional question on this specific topic, we're going to move on to some stuff about how a bill is structured and released, if that's cool. So this is for both of you guys. What are some political tactics and strategies that you've seen that influence how a bill is, in fact, structured and released from either side?
Definitely Riley to start, and then I will offer my opinions.
And real quick, but before you guys go, I want to add some context to that of the recent controversy around adding more legislation onto the much-needed stimulus bills we've been passing, or the debate that's kind of sparked around maybe making a transition towards single-issue bills, and just, what your general thoughts are on that conversation and that as a piece of that question.
Yeah, definitely. So this is, the strategy behind releasing bills is something that me and my team work together every day on, and a lot more goes into bills than I think people realize. I think a good example for me to go through the process with you guys is there's a Farmworker immigration bill that just passed the House last week. That bill has also been,
sorry, it's very exciting.
Yes, with bipartisanship, which is why I'm talking about it, because it's actually bipartisan. So that bill was literally 4 to 5 years in the making, where it goes from democratically edited to Republican edits, and then to all of the different farm bureaus, to the immigration lobbyists, to the immigration advocacy groups, to the USCIS to CBP to DHS. This bill is literally going so many different places, getting so many different edits. And I do also want to point out that these edits that are being done to the bills, I oftentimes think are a lot, it's a great thing to have these bills edited, because people are fresh sets of eyes, different people with different interests are combing through these bills and really getting to the essence of what the implication into their industry or their advocacy that they're working on, what the bill will actually do in actuality compared to legalistic text and regulations, because a lot of times bills actually just advise agencies to do certain things, and then the agencies have to figure out the regulatory structures that they are going to abide by this law by implementing X, Y, and Z regulations, which if you ever are super bored, you can go look at the Federal Registrar, which lists the agencies list the regulations that are going into effect, and there's a comment period, and there's 60 days where people can debate that in the comment section of the Federal Registrar. It is some juicy stuff, and all of these things, it just makes the bill better. And that can go from anywhere from like the American Rescue Plan, the Biden campaign was obviously working on beforehand. The CARES Act, which we passed the end of March of 2020, that came together in less than a month. That was an insanely fast bill that came together, and obviously much needed in the beginning of COVID. But other bills take anywhere up to 10 years. And if you're looking at a bigger bill, like the American Rescue Plan, we had a lot of bills being introduced in that first 2 months of Congress, because you introduce a bill that you say would want to get into the American Rescue Plan, you try and promote it using comms and getting, maybe an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post about the bill that you introduce. You send letters to the leadership in your party or in the opposing party. You send letters to the, agency director of HHS or something, asking that they, look into this issue and help promote the bill idea that you have and that you want to be into the American Rescue Plan. So that was something that I was working on the first 2 months. I was really trying to push federal income taxation on unemployment benefits being waived for 2020. So I was reaching out to reporters, trying to get them to report on this issue, saying hey, this is going to be a big issue. People didn't pay taxes on their unemployment. They're going to owe a huge lump sum. In April, we should definitely fix that by waiving federal income taxes for 2020 on unemployment insurance, trying to, elevate that concern as much as I could, and my boss could, so then eventually it got the attention of the people that were negotiating the bills, which usually is the top, we call it four corners, so that's your majority leader and speaker in the House, or minority leader and speaker in the House, and then majority leader and minority leader in the Senate. I'm happy to say that unemployment provision did make it in the American Rescue Plan, so that was very exciting for me. But in terms of single issue bills, I do just want to point out that we can't pass anything as it is, so the idea of separating bills into single issue bills just sounds like there's absolutely not going to be many things passed. But the interesting thing that I will also note is there were a couple things in the American Rescue Plan, the extension of PPP authorization that was set to expire March 31st, and it just, didn't make it in the bill. That's something that, I think very, very much should have been in the bill, but it wasn't. and that's kind of because we didn't have as much industry and bipartisan combing through the bill as I was speaking of before, making these edits. Someone would have picked up on that with fresh set of eyes. So we had to pass a extension to PPP program authorization through the end of June as a separate single issue bill. So that was, that's like a mistake that didn't make it in the American Rescue Plan. So we did do it as a single issue bill, but most of the time it's just so much easier and I think much more effective. I'm not saying that, it wouldn't be better if we knew all the things that were in a bill, but it's also just how it is right now. So not the best, but that's how it works out.
Hey, Mike, do you want to reset the room real quick and then pass that question on to Brennan?
Yep, we're just going to do that. Thank you, Riley. Awesome stuff over there. Also, thank you. That unemployment tax getting waived, I think that saved the economy because I think a lot of Americans were going to be fucked. I know most people, if they have the option, which they all did, to pay taxes on their unemployment as they collected it, or pay it later on, everyone doesn't think long term here, so they all just say, yeah, I'll worry about it later. And I say the same thing with myself a lot of times too. I'll let future Mike take care of it. So I think this country would have been in shambles as everyone was unable to pay their taxes on that. So thank you, Riley. Quick room reset, as you can see from the topic over here, pretty self-explanatory. Brennan up top and then Riley up top, they work for two U.S. congressmen and congresswomen. So, they're our inside source. They got their ears, they got their eyes close to the situation at hand. And again, if anyone has any question, anything they want to add at any time, just raise your hand. We'll have a queue building up throughout this discussion. We'll bring you on stage and you can, say your piece. We're going to try our best not to engage in political debate, more so, just try to dig in here, see the stuff that we don't see on CNN and Fox News. So, Brennan, I know you wanted to add at the end of that.
Yeah, just a little bit from my end. Obviously, I am not the one looking at the bill, but I will say that when I do get to look at the bill, I guess after everyone has gone through it, it is my job to do the messaging to be able to tell the American people what goes on. So in terms of why we add so many things to one bill, I guess, from a comms perspective, is because when we do that, we can add so much messaging to say what we've gotten done that people will be happy, right? So it's a way of saying that you're delivering on a lot of things, and so that a lot of people can have big wins. Because if you're just doing a single issue bill, there's only so many members that might have touched that, right? So on the farm workers, it's Farm Workforce Modernization Act, sorry. For example, Riley's member, along with 5 other ones, technically were the leads on that. But because, in theory, that gets included in a bill that can get passed later on, a bunch of other people could put their name on it, do the messaging, get that out to their districts, and then their constituents are happy, they will reelect them. So that's one of the big parts. Another one is, I guess, in terms of choice and political strategy and tactics, a lot of the time, leadership will, I guess every time, leadership will tell you whether or not to vote on a bill, right? And they will say, hey, this one's going around, you need to vote yes, you need to vote no. Obviously, any congressperson can choose to vote yes or no. It's still up to them, but it will be very highly recommended from your party that you vote one way or another. So in that practice, I guess, if you are... So that's a reason to add a bill or not add a bill, I guess, in a big package. Another thing, if we want to go with the American Rescue Plan, we did the $15 minimum wage specifically for messaging, right? They knew that wasn't going to pass through the Senate. They had the Senate parliamentarian tell them that it wasn't even possible, and we did that anyway, right? Democrats did that anyway. They decided, yep, this is the right decision. We're going to pass that through. So the reason they did that is so they can say that they tried, not necessarily because it was politically possible. So I guess that's something that I would add. Just legislation and bills in general. I think that kind of answered the question, but Riley had better information.
I wanted to push back a little bit though, just on I think it's really interesting when you start talking to people that are in politics. There's this big disconnect between like people that are not in politics imagine politics as this device to improve the lives of people that are functioning in its society, versus people in politics often take the perspective of, no, my job is to get reelected and get things done. So I guess my question is here, do you think there are any structural changes that we can make that dynamic more aligned, and have politicians be less focused on getting wins for other politicians and more focused on improving the life?
I think it's hard to say like, oh, you're more focused on getting someone else's bill passed and less focused on your people, because like, at least from my perspective, like you're thinking about the American public as a whole when we're working on a federal level. Like, on a state level, you can really start to focus more on your districts. The problem is that this is a completely different like discourse to have on like the benefits of state versus federal politics. But like in theory, with your representation federally, like you are influencing all of the American people. You're not just influencing like your state or district. So while you do want to be able to deliver for those people for the things that you can with like federal wages and things like that, like I personally think that there is more to be done on a state level that would actually influence. So it's better on a federal level to be able to get things done for multiple people at once. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you mean. There's definitely it's definitely a different dynamic at the federal level versus at the state level. But maybe it's a segue a little bit. But I guess my question then would be, how much of the conversation behind closed doors is really about arguing back and forth of, you know what, no, I think the $15 minimum wage would improve the overall health of the economy for these reasons. No, I think it actually might not improve the health of the economy for these reasons. And then how much of the conversation is just, no, we need to get Bill on our side and Jeff on our side to pass this bill, so we got to please him in some way in the tit for tat situation.
I feel like that depends on what stage you are in the bill process. Maybe Riley can speak more to this, but like when a bill is just in your office versus when it's actually in a committee versus when it's been passed. Riley, go.
Yeah, I think I would say that like this tit for tat you're talking about, sometimes it actually makes for a better bill. Sometimes it's definitely can weaken the bill. But sometimes, you know, if you're a congressman from Washington State and you work together on some issue with someone from Texas, then, you know, it might become a better bill for more Americans than just Washington State. But I also, when I do want to point out, I think this is another interesting thing that I learned, like the bills don't go to the floor unless they're going to pass. Like, it's really important, and really, like, leadership is very powerful, and leadership knows how to wield their power in the best way for the most members in their caucus. So the idea of bills going to the floor and, like, you know, last minute changes, like, yes, sometimes those do happen, but most of the time bills are, you know, all of this background deal happens before anything is even, you know, close to the floor, honestly.
Riley, Brandon, if you guys don't mind, I would like to ask a question on this, because I think that this might fit under like the procedural sort of stuff. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the bills we've been passing recently have been through the process of reconciliation, meaning that there is a budget, more or less, right, that is set, and, you know, with this giant budget, as we've seen this last couple of times, it gets distributed to different things that are needed, right? In the latest package, some of it went to COVID, some of it went to the state health, you know, childcare, etc.
Yeah, can I just quickly correct you a little bit on that? So just the last bill done through the American Rescue Plan passed a few weeks ago under President Biden was done through budget reconciliation. So a budget reconciliation bill is a bill that deals exclusively with the manipulation of the budget and manipulation of federal taxes. So,
so what I wanted to ask is, when you guys are referring to like passing bills and this series of bills that are supposed to make it into federal law, right? Can you give us examples of other things that didn't go through that budget reconciliation process that like went into law recently? Because I feel like all the publicity is taken over by like the big budgetary I guess bills, but nothing else. So I was curious, like, what else? What other concrete examples can you give?
So I mean, in this Congress, the only other bill besides the American Rescue Plan that's made its way to President Biden's desk is a waiver for General Lloyd Austin to become Secretary of Defense. But last year, still under President Trump, we had like our annual appropriations bills. We had, I want to say we had some. I remember my boss going to a signing for a bill that was like an anti-human trafficking bill. We've had
Great American Outdoors Act.
Great American Outdoors Act, yeah.
Woo!
Trying to think of some other ones.
Wait, maybe I misheard here, but Pierre, weren't you asking which ones didn't make it there?
No, I was asking which ones made it, because I think that like on the conversation of like, you know, where do you create legislative capacity at the federal level or at the state level, I think that it's clear that at the federal level it's very hard to pass it by. I think, you know,
absolutely.
Examples. But the thing, guys, I wonder, right, is most of the problems that we face as a nation are like national. Right, I think COVID collapsed because we weren't prepared nationally, right? Mm-hmm. So why can't so what's missing? Like, is it like the will of the American people? Are we not bothered enough, or is it the lack of knowledge and understanding of the people that we are electing? Or is it just like the sheer politics that doesn't allow for agreement? Because the problems are there. I think the willingness is there. Why don't we pass federal legislation?
And then I'm gonna let you answer that, Riley, and if you want to add Brennan, you can as well. And then from there, Pierre, save any questions you have for a little bit later. We have a big queue of people we want to get to that have questions as well. But you know, I know you're gonna have questions, so I do want to hear them. They're always solid. Oh, Pierre, brother, it's all good, my man. We love your questions. You always ask really great questions. I just want to make sure we get, you know, give everyone else a chance at least after this response to ask their questions as well. So save or write some questions down for later, because we'll definitely have time.
Also, you brought up state level, and I know Sean is actually in Springfield right now. I don't know the logistics of who he works for in Illinois, but state level questions we can direct towards him, and we can go from there.
Yep. So Riley, go ahead, and if you wanted to answer Pierre's question, take a second to do that, and then Sean, that'll be your time to ask your question after.
Okay. I would say politics is definitely part of it, and on the converse of what Brennan was saying about how she likes to, or you know, each caucus, each party likes to push that a whole bunch of members contributed on this bill. On the converse, sometimes under different administrations, or the party doesn't want to give the other party a win. So not to bash on the Democrats too much, but there is some thought that they held out until Biden was president to pass another COVID relief bill because leadership knew that they could get a better bill with Biden in office or imminently becoming president. So they didn't want to take a smaller, skinny deal, as what the Republicans were saying, because then that would be another check coming with President Trump's signature on it, and the electoral calculations on that weren't as good as waiting. But there's, you know, and that happens conversely on the Republican side as well. So I think that's definitely part of it, unfortunately. But I do think there's a lot more bipartisanship that happens that you don't see on, like, on the news. I think the news is the best thing that the news can do for its economic stability is to promote and report on controversy. So unfortunately, that's what gets covered. There's definitely a lot of bipartisanship and working together through both parties on the Hill, but on those major topics, I think it really takes political will. It takes, the support of leadership, and a lot of that has to do with electoral calculations, unfortunately.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that, Riley. Brennan, if you wanted to add anything really quick, you can. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Sean for his question.
All good. Let's turn it over to Sean. I want to hear what you have to say.
All right, Sean, come on down because your price is right.
I didn't have a question, but just for some background on myself, I previously worked for the Senate Republican leader here in Illinois. I now work on our policy and budget staff here. I'm actually down in Springfield right now. So there's, just from the state and federal perspective, there are, distinct differences. Obviously, the process of, enacting legislation and things like that is fairly similar, but the challenges that they experience at the federal level are absolutely different than what we experience here on the state level. There's a lot more willingness to be bipartisan and do things across the aisle that you won't necessarily see at the federal level. And frankly, there's just a lot more good policy to do at the state level because of the way, our government is structured. So it's just a little bit easier. There's still, obviously there's Republicans and Democrats. We don't always get along. We don't always agree on a lot of different things. But it's just a different kind of outlook.
Hey, can I hop in with a question then? Take Sean's spot real quick.
Go on, Travis.
Thanks, Mike. One thing so I worked for a session at the Texas Capitol, and a lot of the people who worked at the state level had previously been in D.C., and what scared a lot of them away ultimately was this idea that there was just way too much polarization and that they couldn't get anything done. Everything was too partisan. And like a separate story that I heard from multiple people multiple times was that they would be at a bar, meet someone new, and they would tell them, who they were working for. And it turned out that the person they were talking to worked for someone on the other side of the aisle, and they would just turn around and walk away. And that was the end of their conversation, basically. That's how polarized it had gotten. Riley and Brennan, do y'all get that sense very much, or do you think that's kind of overblown and is just something that people in the Texas government were telling themselves to make themselves feel better about leaving D.C.?
Well, me and Brennan are best friends, and we don't agree politically on anything. But we're also we align on some things, and we're able to talk about them in ways. But I think generally, honestly, at bars, I think there's a lot more, there's way less. It is not that tense at bars. I have not experienced that at all. Brennan, have you?
It depends. It depends on what bar you're at, to be honest with you. If I throw myself into a bar more filled with conservatives, or if I happen to go out with a conservative friend, I have one specifically that no matter what, we will end up at a bar with a fight. So I choose not to go with her anymore. But I think a lot of it is about where you put yourself, how far out you want your opinions to be. If you're gonna be at a bar yelling shit, yeah, you're probably gonna get some pushback, and you probably lose some friends. But I feel overall, most people in DC are staffers, right? We're just trying to get things done behind the scenes. So I have found a lot more camaraderie than there is necessarily partisan bickering.
I just want to add one more thing on that. I think that what was I going to say? Oh, okay. So one thing that I think is really interesting, and I think everyone should have their own, take on this, and I think it is important to
look at your worldview and how you think you can best impact the world. But I think most of the people that I know that work on the Hill, and me personally, I believe that the way that things will change is within the system, and small incremental change is still valid and good change. Some people are very much more so on the advocacy side, and that is vitally important to our government to function and to keep pushing the boundaries of what people think is possible. But unfortunately, if you are of the advocacy, like completely transform the system type mindset, and then you come work on the Hill, you can very easily be dissuaded from politics in general, or just the Hill specifically, because it is really slow. It is really, disheartening at times. Like, I'm going to hold on to this unemployment win for probably my whole life, because there's not a lot of wins that you get. But I try and tell myself, and I don't know if this is just me coping with it, but I try and tell myself that since I can handle this, and since I do believe that government is worth, reforming, and small incremental change is important, that I need to continue that work, because that's the way that I'm going to help impact the world. And, some people are not cut out for that, but since I can do that, I'm part of the whole, big wheel of the world all changing and working together. So a lot of times when people say that they completely hated it and it was, totally not what they expected, I'm like, you should go work in advocacy, or you should work at a nonprofit, or you should work at a think tank, because you will be much happier there.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Riley. Real quick, just, everyone give it up for her. You can do that by just muting and unmuting your mic real quick. Learned this last week. Oh yeah, that's what the kids do nowadays. So, quick room reset. Like I said, topic right here, U.S. politics, what happens behind closed doors, pretty much speaks for itself. Riley, Brennan, they work for two U.S. congressmen. Sean up here, he just spoke a second ago. He works for in the Illinois House on matters there. And yeah, we're going to be having this discussion. So as you can see, we've got a queue building up over here. We're going to turn it over to, I think Price is up next. He has a question. And so, yeah, if you have a question, raise your hand, or if anything you want to add, just raise your hand. We're going to add you to the end of the queue, and then we will go in order. That way we can kind of keep it orderly. And last but not least, this is your third reminder now that this conversation is being recorded. It will go on YouTube, so do not say anything that you do not want to have on the internet. And that's about 30 minutes from your next reminder.
Also, if you have something to add to a topic, feel free to just popcorn it out and add what you got to add. You don't have to just wait to your turn to speak. Really.
Right. And then also, last room reset, I promise. We do have a Discord going. If you want to, hop in there, you want to add something, but it's not your turn to ask a question yet, and maybe you don't want to speak, just hop in the Discord. There's a section in there for questions, so you can ask it, and we'll just ask it ourselves if you don't want to speak. And then there's also a channel in there for links and resources. So Riley mentioned the Federal Registrar, where you can see any bill, anything going through legislation right now. I threw a link in there for y'all to be able to check that out as well. So with that being said, room is reset. Price, I think you had a question.
Yeah, pardon me. Thank you so much for putting this room on. It's great. My question is, I come from it more. I'm from the campaign side of politics. I've been working in campaigns for about 4 years. And I guess my question is to everyone here, I'd love to hear your thoughts, is how big do you think the disconnect is between kind of the Beltway bubble and the American electorate, and that actually extends over to the state level, state politics, and some of these really hot button issues in particular that we're currently dealing with across the country. So I guess the question is, how big do you think that bubble is between those people who are working in D.C. every day and then the average American voter on the things they're voting for when they go to the polling place on election day?
Good question, Pierce. This is kind of what I was trying to ask earlier.
Well, I can go. Brennan and I both, I know, grew up in more rural areas. So I think that is definitely helpful. But a lot of our friends definitely did not, and probably have never been to a farm or have been to, one of those towns in middle America. So I think it's pretty big, unfortunately. I think, the people that are working in DC or on the Hill, you truly 1,000% have to be of, at least upper middle class to work on the Hill, just because the pay is so minimal. Your starting salary on the Hill is somewhere around 25 to 30K. And rent in DC is not cheap. So, you definitely have to have some kind of family help or resources. I mean, you can make it work. I'm not saying that not discouraging you if you want to make it work, but I'd say, 95% of people do have some family help or some, resources. So I think that also is a huge contributing factor to this Beltway bubble that we have. I think it's really important for people to understand, a different background from their own perspective. And I hope, and I do think that working for a congressional office does give you some insight into a different way of life. But I don't think, we don't get out much, It's hard when you're living here and you don't have, the access to the people, especially I work for a California member. It's not like I can just pop over to the district and see what they're talking about. We have district staff that helps, but not seeing it firsthand is definitely difficult.
I think my opinion on being out of touch with Middle America, sorry, Price, can you just quickly rephrase your question so I don't answer the wrong thing?
Oh, no, I'm just talking about, like I said, I come from a campaign background. So, I've worked on federal campaigns, state level campaigns, local campaigns. And especially on federal campaigns, when you're working on that campaign, you're selling a set of ideas to someone.
Yeah.
And why you're trying to vote for them. And so let's say that person gets elected, and all of a sudden that person realizes, well, either they get entrenched into the DC circuit or they kind of lose touch with their general voter base. And I'm just trying to kind of just conceptualize how systemic that disconnection is in Congress. Because I'm a California-based guy. I come from like a little rural town in Southern California, but I've been across the country, urban, rural. It doesn't really matter. I think it can happen regardless, anywhere you go. But like I said, that just the systemic nature of disconnection between the actual people in power who are making these decisions and the electorate.
Yeah, okay. I would say as someone who was an intern a few times, picking up calls of people screaming at them, it's not that people aren't having their voice heard. It's just that at the end of the day, it's not enough, right? Like there's not enough people out there who are making their voice heard. Like you have to send in, I don't even know how many. Riley would know a better number for how many to get listened to, but I'm just going to throw a ridiculous one out and say like 20,000. Like there has to be 20,000 letters from a district for that congressperson to be like, okay, this is something that really matters that people are going to mobilize about, right? Not just like this call to change, I guess. So like a lot of campaign politics. I worked on a campaign last cycle, and I felt like it was just like calling on people's emotions all the time. You're just saying like, oh, like you care about guns, but it's not ever about actual legislation. And I think when you get to the Hill, and you're actually trying to make that change, like if you're, the congressperson from Boulder, and this is something that really, really you need to change for your constituents, like at the end of the day, you're just going to keep hitting this wall, I guess, the wall of being able to get things done. And so you either have to build up your power, which is really just based on time, to be able to get those, topics to the floor within like leadership conversations, or you need to be so outspoken, like someone like AOC, who has built up this, cult of personality almost like Trump's, in a way, of people following her, because she is able to create more change because she has established this name for herself, and forced people to listen. So if a congressperson that you want to elect doesn't seem like that kind of person, but they're still calling to your values. Like maybe, I guess, if you're an elector or a voter, like consider that before you elect that person, and how powerful they'll be in Congress and actually responsive to you.
I think that another thing to say, just in terms of how to build your power in Congress, like it's either time time in Congress. So you just work your way up, or you skip the line like AOC because you've built this insane social media presence, and she's single-handedly one that made that $15 minimum wage get into the COVID bill. Like her advocacy over the past few years has brought a lot of very progressive ideas that, well, I don't want to say very progressive. The ideas that would have not have been talked about 4 years ago are now, key points of the Democratic base. But the other third way that Brennan didn't mention would be, trading in favors and, sucking up to leadership, which is, a way that, which everyone does. Everyone has to suck up to leadership. Like that is 1,000% what you have to do if you want any semblance of power. Members get kicked off committees if they're not nice to leadership. Like that's just very, leadership is very important in how powerful you can be. So if you think, you have to take that into your calculation as well. If you're going to stand on your own on some issue, the repercussions could also be in terms of your power in Congress. And if you don't have power in Congress, then you aren't going to be able to get as many bills and as many of your priorities put into bills or passed, and then you're probably going to get voted out because the electorate is going to say you're not doing anything. And it's like, well, leadership won't let me because I stood for something that they didn't want me to. And then that's another thing that you have to factor into your decision if you want to be a voice for something, which is crazy, but it is true.
Riley, can you say that one more time, a little bit louder for the people in the back, because it's something that people don't realize nowadays, or seemingly they don't realize. And I think in America it's great that we all have a voice, but everyone has just been, given this pretense that if they don't like something, they can just talk really loudly and, get their way, and they're upset when they don't get their way. And, if they would just take some time to realize that you got to pick your battles, you got to kiss some ass here and there, because without the power, if you don't kiss ass to get to the top, you're never going to have the power. You're never going to be able to make the change that you want to make.
Yeah. I think a really great example is Katie Porter down in Orange County. She has been obviously she's gotten a lot of media attention with her little whiteboards in the committee hearings where she's grilling, the Alex Azar, the HHS secretary. How are you going to pay for these COVID vaccines? Like, is it going to be free? Can you promise me today that it's going to be free? She was a lawyer. She has this great presence. She's a single mom, drives a minivan. She's great. But she had a little, this is public information. I'm not saying anything that's not reported. She had a tiff with the Financial Services Chairwoman, Maxine Waters, who is a very close ally of Pelosi, because Waters didn't want her to have the props in the committee room, and she went to file her committee, which committee she wanted to be on for the 117th Congress, and she didn't get financial services. Technically, she was on a waiver last Congress, so it's plausible that she wouldn't get that committee again. But if you're making that kind of, great publicity for the committee, you would think that you would want to keep that person on the committee. But she had, some trouble with leadership, basically. And that was a direct consequence of her having trouble with leadership, and that hurts her power. Like, she was creating this great brand for herself of being the single mom that stands up to these, white guys that won't give her the answer, old white guys that won't give her a direct answer, and are just evading the question, but she's going to go at them. But if leadership doesn't give her the opportunity to sit on the committee where she can do that, how can she further that brand?
Well said. Brendan, did you want to add something there real quick before we move on to the next question?
I'm excited for the next question. Riley really killed it.
Awesome. Price, I hope that answered your question. I think next up is Don. Quick room reset. If you have any questions, guys or ladies in the crowd, go ahead, raise your hand. We've got a queue. As you can see, we're going in order, so everyone will have a chance to ask their questions. We started early because we knew it would be a long discussion, so we'll have more than enough time to make sure we get to everyone. That being said, Don, go ahead, ask your question.
Sure, thanks. So one of the results we saw of the Citizens United decision is essentially unrestricted access of institutional influence on campaign fundraising and as a result, candidates themselves. So whether it's an organization like the NRA opposing, even the slightest indication of gun control or different unions opposing meaningful education reform, I'm curious how you both have seen the influence of those institutions and lobbies influenced in the legislative process, whether it's in just campaign financing or in the actual writing and drafting of legislation.
I can definitely take campaign finance side, and Riley, I think, can do legislative side, so whichever one y'all want to hear first.
Go, Brent.
Okay, campaign finance, baby. Okay, so the way that this works, and I found this out because I was phone banking for someone and just spent way too much time calling really rich people and asking them for money. And I think at the end of the day, what we're looking at is that Edelman, Deloitte, places like Goldman Sachs, things like that. I happened to be helping out a member that was on the Financial Services Committee and also trying to get back on. So he was very specifically to financial services. But the thing is, this man has been in Congress for a very long time. He does not necessarily need money to run his campaign. He doesn't really need money at all because everyone knows his name already. They're still going to vote him back into his seat. He doesn't really have a problem. He's very safe. He still has to raise money, right? And he's still a party to these. He has to raise money in order to get the chairmanship that he wants from leadership. And so he has to basically serve these interests like Goldman Sachs or whatever that are going to want him to make certain policy decisions in the future in return for their money. That being said, that does not mean that he's actually going to make a policy decisions because they gave him money. But does that mean that at the end of the day, they're the ones funding the campaigns that he gets to help? Yes, absolutely. So it is a factor, but I don't want to say that like somebody is corrupt simply because they're taking money. So Citizens United, I'm sure everyone has like a little bit of a base understanding, but like Citizens United in general basically means that money is speech. So, which it is, right? You put your money where your mouth is. But it basically makes it so that as a group of people can come together, they can all put maybe a little bit in and then act as a corporation and put a lot more money in. So you have this kind of silent fundraiser of campaigns. That kind of leads to the money that gets fundraised for those people. For example, the financial services one, he wanted to be the chairman of the Financial Services Committee. So he had to raise a lot of money in order to appease leadership in order to get that position that he wants. Because they will place him up there if he raises the right amount of money, right? Because the money that he raises is going to be disseminated into other campaigns that don't necessarily have the capability to fundraise the amount that they need to win that seat. So that's kind of, I guess, how I would say the campaign fundraising side of things, like how the money gets into the system in the first place. But then there's a whole other side of it where these same groups come in on the other side and they say, okay, great, so you're elected. Here's the things we need you to do. But it's not necessarily always bad. And I think Riley will have a lot to say about that in terms of, look, these people can actually be very, very beneficial to the decisions that we're trying to make because they have so much more information about a certain topic. So, Riley, I think you had opinions on this. Take it away.
Yeah. I just want to put it out to the group. This is not like gold, or this isn't this. I don't know how exactly accurate these numbers are, but as Brennan was saying, the member she was working with in fundraising was trying to become a committee chair, and to become a committee chair, you have to fundraise somewhere between $600,000 to $900,000 to the the party, so to the DCCC or to the NRCC. Just to put that in perspective, rank and file members are anywhere from like 200 to 500,000, and your speaker or minority leader is up in like the 50 mil spot. So just so you guys realize how much money that actually is. But in terms of lobbyists in influence on bills, I know that lobbying gets a really bad rap, and there's definitely like the famous lobbyist groups that you're talking about, like Big Pharma, NRA, those, deservedly have bad reputations for the impact, the disproportionate impact that they have. But I would say that there's a whole bunch of other lobbyists that are not evil and in fact are extremely helpful and help me do my job so much better. I run, I'm the one that is working on this stuff, but I'm 2 years out of college. Like, I don't have the institutional knowledge about telecommunication infrastructure investment or rural broadband. Like, I can read all I want about it, but I still am not going to have the same information and knowledge as a 30, 40-year professional in that industry. And the reason that I'm working this job is because it's a low pay. So we can't, as I was saying before, it takes a lot to enter into this field because you have to have the financial resources, but it also takes a lot to stay in the field. And our retention rate is extremely low for the federal government, on the Hill side at least, because even those higher salaries, you can be making 2, 3, 4 times as much as a lobbyist doing less work. So I think it's the lobbyists are they're experts in most of in the best sense of the word. Like, I can't be an expert on the 10 issue areas that I'm supposed to help the congressman on, as I'm 2 years out of college and I studied international relations. Like, there's just no way I could know everything that I need to know. So we have lobbyists. We have a service called Congressional Research Service, which is another extremely helpful resource for congressional staffers. Those papers are they're publicly accessible as well, and they have great papers I would highly recommend. But in terms of, I'm trying to work on let's see. I was working on a labor standards with COVID, like how the federal OSHA versus Cal OSHA was enacting regulation from the CARES Act. And, I don't know how California's OSHA is, regulating, and how what they say on the website, how it actually looks in actuality. So I was talking to lobbyists about it. They can really help and be helpful in this process. There are definitely some that have much more undue influence. I will say something in my office, like, they don't want us legislative staffers to know exactly who is our highest donors. But if there is something that's, needs to get through quickly because they are a big donor, that will be relayed to us, but it's not something that we talk, like, I've never personally had that sentence be muttered to me, but I'm sure that would happen if it needed to. But we really do try and not look. I don't look, and I try not to look, and try not to know who's a big donor versus who's not. But I can't say that other offices abide by those policies.
I'm glad Donald brought this up, because as someone that's worked in an emerging market of the hemp industry and now the cannabis industry, I think you could say without question that lobbying is necessary, especially when markets are emerging. And new concepts and dynamics are at play that you just absolutely could not expect a legislator to understand. But as industries grow and they become governed by maybe a committee within the House of people that do understand that topic, do you or Brennan or really anybody in the room think there are ways that we can temper the influence that these lobbying groups gain as the industry gets bigger and bigger, and maybe curb that and create less crony capitalism in the later stages?
One thing I do want to say, Slater, unfortunately, so people that are on committees it's not necessarily because they are, experts in that topic. The people, at least for the chair or the ranking member, those are just the best fundraisers. But rank and file members on committees usually have some interest in it. And our committee staff gets paid a little bit better than member staff, so they're usually better experts. But in terms of how to dampen that down, I think you have to, there's the possibility of some kind of change in campaign finance. HR 1 was passed by the House. There's the possibility of, nuking the filibuster in the Senate over HR 1. And that would introduce publicly funded campaigns. I think that is a possible solution. I'm personally not for it, but
I like the idea of it. Can you tell me why you disagree?
I don't think that taxpayer dollars should be going to fund campaigns. I think it's a pretty...
Isn't a business a taxpayer?
A business?
Boo! Like anybody that's donating. Boo!
Yeah, they're
I think she's saying...
with their opinion. Like, what if everyone's taxpayer dollars would go into the same fund, and those funds would be distributed equally to the candidates, or by proportion to
I didn't realize that's what you meant.
Yeah, so I think that that's a violation of what taxes should be used for.
All right.
Yeah, I guess just to add the source of my question, the problem here is that this gives an asymmetric advantage to larger incumbent institutions who use that power to maintain their power. So that's a telco, right, lobbying to overturn net neutrality, which is clearly damaging to a consumer, right? And Bitcoin's doing well, but I don't have enough money to be lobbying institutions like JP Morgan. And ultimately, for me, the challenge is really that there is this idea of closed doors in government. And save for national security issues in the military, why this stuff is opaque is totally beyond me, whether it's a financial perspective or whether it's a legislative perspective. Because that only enables the powers that be to maintain their power and, continue exploiting where they're exploiting.
Yeah, I think it's really important to bring that point up. The people in power don't want power to shift because that would give them less power. So I think I forget who asked the question previously, but why don't things get done? That's another very legitimate answer. The more change and the more updates or change in policy, the less power that people that are in power now, not just politicians, but in the financial world, in the telecommunications world, any kind of change disrupts the market, and right now the market favors the people that have the most influence. So yeah.
All right. Thank you for that, Riley.
Real quick, I gotta go for Mike.
Sorry, Nolan, we got a slight queue up here. Feel free to piggyback on any of the questions asked in the beginning, but we got to get to TK next, and then Lucas, Pat, then you. Quick room reset. Another reminder. Topic tonight speaks for itself, or the title does. You got politicians in here, or people who work for politicians, very high up U.S. congressmen, U.S. congresswomen. Sean up here works in the Illinois State House for one of our state representatives. And so, yeah, we've got people who are way more credible on this topic than I am. So they're here for you to ask them questions. And obviously we have more than enough time for y'all to get to your questions. Just raise your hand in the crowd. We're building up a queue up here, obviously, and then don't feel like once you're up here you can't speak either. If you have something to add once someone's done talking, just add on to it. But let's try to keep it brief so we can get to as many questions as possible. And this is your 30-minute friendly reminder that this conversation is being recorded. It is going to get posted on YouTube. Do not say anything that you do not want to have posted on the internet, or you're not comfortable having on the internet. From there, let's move on to our next person. Tommy, I think you had a question.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to preface this with, I'm actually Sean's roommate, so I like to pick his brain here and there, but it's really great hearing, he's on a state level, so hearing the national level and everything's always really interesting. But this is 100% serious, by the way. But I'm just curious to hear your guys' answers on this. Why should I vote? Why does my vote matter? It's the most common thing you hear, and I love hearing people's opinions on it. And I know it's a really simple question, not policy related or anything, but I just want to pick your guys' brain and know why my vote does matter.
I would love to know if you're paying attention to politics.
Well, I do live with Sean, so by default, I have to.
So you're informed. So you're informed is what you're telling me. You're informed, so yes, your vote matters. I mean, everyone's vote matters and everyone should vote, but specifically because you have chosen to become informed and knowledgeable as you can be, I think that you should absolutely vote because no matter what, your opinion matters, but especially because you are choosing to know what's going on, your opinion extra matters, and why wouldn't you want to at least try to have that mean something?
I, for one, I mean, it's cliche, but it's like a more or less a civic duty. There's other countries that don't have the benefit of participating in free and fair elections, and that's something I'm eternally grateful for. And I also think that elections just have, long-lasting impacts and consequences on our life. For me personally, I've seen it at the state and local level. And that's typically like when I go to the voting booth and I vote in Illinois, it doesn't matter who I vote for president, it's going to go blue. But there's, real opportunities to potentially have a say in who's getting elected at the state and local level, where, there's just as important of stuff going on happening within your own state. So I think it's just, civic duty and that sort of thing.
So do you guys feel that it's dangerous at all for an uninformed voter to vote, say for maybe a wrong reason, or is it more beneficial for them for their voice to be heard regardless of if they're informed or not?
I mean, I think that everyone should vote regardless. I don't think that should be a precedent if you're informed or not, because if you're informed or not is a subjective question. But also just piggyback off Sean, I don't want to, encourage people to not vote for president, but if you're going to vote for anything, you should 1,000% be voting for your local measures versus president. Those are just so much more important and so much more impactful, and I think that it just does not get said enough, and that is if you take away one thing from this conversation, it is please look into your local measures on the ballot. Local city councilman, county supervisor is like the most important job in a local community, and vote on those things.
I'm currently trying to look for my notes from college, from the actual numbers of percentages of people who vote for president versus for their local people, and the direct impact that they will have, and the percentages is just honestly devastating for the fact that people have no idea what's going on in their local thing, but those are the people that are actually changing your life. Anyways, yeah, sorry, I did not want to say.
I think it's like 75 to 80% of people voted in presidential race, but then 10% voted for their city council.
Yeah, something like that.
That's really interesting to hear that, actually.
It's kind of
I mean, like Sean was saying, I think from a state level, your vote definitely does matter. I'm from Illinois, obviously, which is going to go blue. But, I mean, that's kind of why I like to ask that question, because, I think not enough people know that their vote actually does matter, and especially at that level. But yeah, that's kind of, why I asked it. I think it is important.
Also, currently in the House, they're figuring out, there was an election in Iowa that was decided by 6 votes.
Yep.
So
six
your vote
votes.
doesn't matter. That matters.
I would say that it definitely matters, because although Illinois goes blue every single time, like we've established, we voted no for the fair tax, which is a red agenda, which was, in my opinion, a win. And that means that people showed up. So we got the red win on that one. And the president ended up being blue of the United States. And then obviously local community ends up going, we have JB and stuff. So I would say definitely vote all the time, because your vote does matter.
The fact is, we focus an unnecessary amount of time on the president when we need to be focusing all of that time that we waste on the bottom level.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Great point.
And just going off of what Connor was talking about there, with that tax last fall, I mean, that was just a specific example of the rates of people voting for, Joe Biden versus the tax was different in terms of, like, there were a lot more Democrats voting against that tax. So it was a bit of, like, bipartisanship. So that's just like a small level example of kind of that difference at the state level, where, people might actually vote for something that's not necessarily what should be deemed, on their side of the aisle.
I think one question to focus on is, do the Democrats create an Obamacare moment in the 2020s as, like HR 1 is the perfect example, but, like, do they actually have a moment where they take a piece of legislation, put it out there, break filibuster rules, and essentially decide to either live or die by the sword?
Yeah, that's a good question for me. I would say that they are on their way. I can't confirm which of the policies it will end up being, but it will happen. There's definitely, like, the ACA will have a huge amount of amendments. Like, things will change within at least the next 2 years, especially before, the new Congress people get elected in, because who knows where the power will shift in the House. So I think it's almost not so much an if, but a when. And the when is sooner than later. And it's just going to be a matter of trying to get things passed so that people are happy, and trying to make sure that while the Democrats have power, like, they can pass as many things as possible. So if that means busting through the filibuster, like, that's what that means. And honestly, I'm going to send a prayer that they'll get rid of it anyway, but that's
Boom! First, teach us something cool, exclusive, folks, right there.
Okay.
Sorry, Riley, go ahead. Riley, I don't know if you had something you wanted to add there, or Sean. Didn't mean to cut you off.
I just fully agree with Brendan that I think the filibuster will be gone, and honestly, they should just rip off the Band-Aid and do it now if they're going to do it.
Yeah.
We can do like a 24-hour filibuster session one of these days if you guys want to.
I could definitely talk about the filibuster for a while.
I thought we were
get on Clubhouse.
I could go off.
I think we just filibuster and, like, read Cat in the Hat and read lyrics to music and just filibuster. We'll do a filibuster, teach us something cool.
Oh my God, we're gonna have like 6 people tune in.
You can just play McCarthy reading Dr. Seuss over and over again, like.
Tommy, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to your question, or if you're done. If not, or if you are done, I'm going to move on to Lucas. He's been waiting patiently to ask a question. We'll get rolling over here again.
Don't you like this sound? Lucas, the floor is yours, but not for a filibuster, just for a question.
No filibuster, make the question short and
Here I
sweet.
go. Hey, y'all.
And hey, so much for those of you that are working in government on our behalf. Honestly, thank you. And second, before you worked in government, you had preconceived notions of what the experience might be like and how certain processes were run. And I'm curious, what would be surprising to the average citizen to learn about just basic operations behind closed doors, just some like logistics that surprised you when you first came onto the scene? You were like, wait, why does that work that way? We'll look at these inefficiencies. This takes too long. Just all the things that were surprising to you initially. I'm super curious about just the initial notions that might have been shattered.
I've found that one of the most interesting things is just kind of procedurally how legislation actually becomes a law. I think that there's a preconceived notion that bills go through, either chamber, then get passed to the other, and then, they pass and they are, signed by the president or governor into law. Whereas what I've found is the amount of amendments that go through, getting referred to a committee, going to the floor, getting added another amendment, going back to committee, potentially going to the other chamber, then coming back for like a reconciliation vote and things like that. So I think that all throughout that process, there's so many hands that are a part of that, including lobbyists, staff, the politicians themselves. So it's just like a way more in-depth process than what kind of the general understanding is.
I'll say some more things that are like, I don't know, silly. The magazine Hustler, the like porn magazine, is sent to every single member of Congress's office every month. What? Like, it's so funny. It is so weird, but it is a fact.
Like from Hustler?
Yeah.
Oh, good for them. I don't know if that's a Hugh Hefner on one, but I guess that man's got it. Got some plays he's trying to make in politics.
Tell him there's a new congressman. Yeah. Tell him there's a new congressman in town. He lives at.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, in terms of things that we get sent very random things. We get like China Daily, which is like literally propaganda. We get sent a lot of food products, which is interesting. There's like a underground snack trade that goes on the Hill. This is all like more staff stuff. Very important trade.
This is the good stuff that I'm here for.
Yeah.
I want to.
Yeah, this is incredible.
Yeah, Riley, let's go underground about the snack trade. I mean, there's like a whole listserv email chain that's like all dedicated to snack trading. It's great. Quality chain. Before COVID, yeah. What's up?
I'm just clarifying. It sounds legitimately like the precursor to cryptocurrency is just like Snickers bars. like the underground sound money, U.S. economy.
Literally. Like, you know which states have, like, the good stuff. Like, I'm a huge popcorn fan, so I go to Indiana offices. The Snickers is in Texas, but, yeah, weird now I know where the headquarters or the district that has that in their district. But, what else is there? Oh, there's a lot more. So before COVID, there was like receptions that are put on by lobbyists or lobbying groups, and there's like such weird rules where you can't have a meal, but you can have appetizers and hors d'oeuvres, and you can have drinks.
So all of us poor Hill staffers go to these events and then just, get 6 or 10 plates of appetizers, and that's your dinner, and then you get free booze, and then you mingle, make friends, meet lobbyists. The Hill is all about, like, making connections, because eventually when you leave the Hill, it's all about who you know and how your, like, Rolodex can help a company in the future if you do leave the Hill, unless, if you want to stay on. It's still important, even on the Hill, it's important to have friends in different offices so you can try and get things done, get, like, actual legislatively, and, get good snacks and stuff. What else is there? Oh, well, just on, like, a little bit more heartening note, I think, like, there's a lot more bipartisan friendships of the members than you would think, and sometimes it's, like, so cute to watch them interact on the floor, because there's always the camera of C-SPAN playing, or, like, the camera's always rolling, and we'll, like, see our boss on the floor, like, talking to someone of the other party or something, and we're like, oh my god, that's so cute. Or they, like, and he comes back with, like a gift from their office or something, and they're definitely a lot better friends and colleagues than the media makes it seem.
I would say I was pretty stoked to find out that my office is directly outside the office of a member that has barbecue every single Friday, brought up directly from his state, which is so beautiful. So things like that, I think, become very fun. What did I not know? I did not know how lobbying works. I did not know that all of these people come to the Hill on, like, one specific day to all talk about the same thing. Like, I got caught. Oh, this is such a bad story, but, like, for example, all of the blind community, not all of it, whatever, some representatives from the blind community will come, and they will all come in the same day. And there was a bunch of, like, dogs around, seeing eye dogs, things like that. And I was, like, speed walking, and I absolutely, like, crashed into somebody. It was the most uncomfortable experience of my life. But I will say it was entertaining as hell, and people laughed, and I made some friends. But I didn't know that was a thing. Like, I didn't know that at work on a day-to-day basis, like, I would be surrounded by people that would come for the day. I definitely did not know about the events. That is definitely how I fed myself. I think it's the only way that interns get through with their salaries. There's an entire, there's a wine caucus, and you can show up and you can taste wines from all across America. What else did I not know? Oh, I didn't know how slow but fast things went. I definitely didn't know that when I called my representative, it really didn't matter. It really didn't. It was kind of upsetting, to be honest with you, when I was first an intern.
Can you elaborate that? Can you just a little bit more? Like, that's what we're taught growing up, right? Is just like, call your representative. That's like such a loud phrase heard in many domains.
Yes.
What do you mean it doesn't matter?
So it doesn't matter unless you do it in bulk. Like, you would have to have 200 of your friends call and say the same exact thing just to, like, get somebody to listen, right? Like, every single one of your calls in theory is noted, but it's only noted for your constituents. Don't call not your district, like, not your representative. But, like, you can call and you can have this conversation, and what they'll put down is, this person called about this topic, they were upset, right? And then if you sent an email or, like, an actual letter in the mail, then we're basically, like, required to respond to you. That's, like, what a legislative correspondent does, and they respond to constituents about, like, their issues. But if you just call in, like, nothing's ever going to get done. So I didn't realize that. It was disappointing.
We're going to wake up tomorrow, and we're going to see a New York Times article that said, calling your representative dead, ? And Luke is going to be the one who wrote it.
Oh, my God.
Bro, it's coming out on Medium tonight.
That's what I was thinking. Like, you just got caught on the hot mic. He's about to run you over.
Honestly,
there is hope. There is hope, like, on a local level more, especially.
Backtrack.
Like, I call, no, I'm serious. I go savage. I'm what they call a Becky. It's a young version of a Karen. and I go hard on my local representatives. I know that my federal representatives have way too much going on to listen to me at all, but my local representatives have answered. So the other day, I got a pothole on my street filled. It was a big win for me. And another day, I know this sounds dumb, but
That's a win.
Dude, pothole canceled.
That's a win. That's a major win.
It was a big win. And the other thing is, like, right now, at all my California people, I have been going crazy calling all of my representatives, any place that, like, any of my family owns a house, which is also ridiculous, but I don't really care, to tell them that I demand they remove Junipero Serra's statue from the United States Capitol. So, you know, if you have some free time and you want to call your representative and help us to sort out, just tell them that he killed Native Americans, enslaved them, forced them to build missions, and now he's being represented. He's representing one of the most progressive states in our nation.
Who is this? Who is this?
Lucas, you got half the article wrote. You can actually just a little. Indeed.
Brennan.
Thank you for the information.
Brennan.
That was actually that was refreshing. Because I honestly didn't know about the underground snack trade. I didn't know about Hustler. I certainly didn't know that contacting your reps doesn't matter. I think that's actually super helpful. I have one final question to explore that further. What criteria do the decision makers use to listen to X number of calls? So is it like you said 200 of your friends, but against what backdrop of population? Like, what percentage does it have to actually trigger action?
So I think I'll take this one because I handle mail. I've handled mail now for about 2 years. So the average district, congressional district, is around 700,000 people. That being said, I think we get annually engagement from probably like less than 100,000.
Wow.
And that's like our, you know, even just responding to one survey or something, like it's pretty low. But Brennan threw out the number like 20,000. I would say it's definitely lower than that.
I also threw out 200. I'm throwing out numbers here.
Yeah. So the tips that I would have for people if they want to get noticed by their representative in terms of like a major issue is, one, volume is definitely important. If you have, 200 of your friends send in the same email, I think that is a way to get noticed. Somewhere around 200 will definitely be noticed. Even probably 100 will probably be noticed, especially if it's something like not something plausible or something that like is a newer thing, not something like, I don't know, for my boss, like if you're saying pass the Green New Deal, like that's not going to be, I mean, it's responded to, but it's not going to be like taken into account necessarily, as much as something that's, within the confines of plausibility. And no offense. But if you don't have 100 friends or 200 friends that can write to the congressman with the same message, you should definitely write an individualized message that is not too long, but still explains the topic that you care about, and that will get you a more personalized response. And sometimes if it's a very like niche subject, you might get passed along to a district representative or a staffer in DC. But at least in my office policy, if we get one of these letters that's personalized and personally written about, a subject that's important, or I mean any subject, honestly, that's gonna dictate an individualized response. Although it's written by me, it's still something more. I take those messages into account more than. And if I get a message like that that's very well put and well thought out, like I'll pass that along to the relevant staffer more than. And the last thing I'll say, which goes against what Brennan's tactics are, but I think you should be nice. I'm
not always not nice. I just give them 10 times, and then I'm mean.
Brennan gets potholes fixed, all right?
I do.
She gets the job done.
Yeah.
I guess.
An entire month. in my experience, it's better to be nice. Also, the fact that, like, usually the people that are, if you're calling, usually the people that are manning the phones are interns, and they're, like, too scared to tell the staffers, like, a message that you said if it was that mean, or they're just terrified in general because this is their first time experiencing, you know, those kinds, this experience. So calling in and being angry, I think, is probably the least effective thing. But, you know, if that's what your therapy is for the day, then, like, I support that. I did every single morning. I had a friend, Jill. She called me every single morning at 6 a.m. her time, 9 a.m. my time, and she would ask for me specifically. This is when I was an intern. And she would literally just use me for a therapy session. So, you know, you can call if you want. Like, we'll stay on the phone with you.
So you're telling me that none of my Mitch McConnell sucks eggs messages got through?
That's a different kind of therapy.
No, they just call her brother.
All right.
Hey, thank you so much for answering the question just in depth. I appreciate that. I'm off to go find potholes and publish this essay. I'll talk to you later.
Do it.
Thanks, Lucas.
For coming, Lucas. Miss you, man.
We'll talk soon.
I miss you too.
Brennan, really quick before we move on, we'll do a quick room reset in a second as well. Who was the person you said killed all the Native Americans?
Junipero Serra.
How do you spell that?
JUNIPERO and then SERA. Everyone call your congresspeople, not your congresspeople, your local representatives, like your the governor. Matters a lot, but he never picks up the phone. I've called, trust me. But like your assembly members, people like that are effective because it's a state-by-state basis. It's not federal. Otherwise, I would ask my own representative.
Consider them canceled.
Yes, cancel Winifred Sarah.
Oh man, they did not see this one coming. So.
They've been dead for like 200 years.
Oh yeah, dude. They didn't see it coming. Who would have thought? Real quick, room reset. Topic right above speaks for itself. We've got people in here on the stage who are very credible on this topic. You know, they've got the authority to speak on the subject. They work for the people who, you know, the topic's about. So that's Brennan, that's Riley, that's Sean. Obviously, we got a wealth of knowledge up here. We're going in order. I'm going to go to you next, Pat. You know, you've been waiting patiently. Appreciate that. Quick reminder that this is being recorded. Do not say anything that you do not want to have on the internet because this is going right on YouTube as soon as my video editor gets it back to me. Yeah, that being said, Pat, go ahead. Thank you for waiting patiently.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for everybody on the call today. So this is more of like a punditry question, I guess. But hearing all your backgrounds, I'd be interested in hearing it. Party identity, kind of. So, like, in my opinion, like political parties, both of them have never really had less power than they do now in terms of control and like where the party's headed. Looking at AOC side and Trump, but more specifically, like GOP, seeing kind of the civil war happening. There's a lot of uncertainty in the next 4 years. You have like your one wing, like Romney, Liz Cheney types, and then you have like your base that's never supported a Republican candidate as much as they do Trump, even Reagan, which is pretty crazy. And so kind of with Trump, with a bad track record of losing both House, Senate, presidency, I'm curious to hear your perspective on kind of how the back office or backdoor kind of maybe GOP elites try to navigate away from Trump, or do they? And maybe like how does the Democratic Party like combat that, or however which way you want to go? I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on the whole thing.
Yeah, I can definitely talk like GOP strategy. I mean, I think the party's not making any dramatic moves, and they won't be making any dramatic moves for a while. They're going to just continue walking this line of trying not to piss off Trump voters while trying to keep to what is generally construed as conservatism, even though the party is definitely, or factions of the party have definitely strayed into a more populist wing. But I think that there's a lot more there's a lot more power in the establishment side, so Romney, Cheney side, than I think we're giving credit to. I obviously think the Trump faction won out, and the people are very strong backers and dedicated backers of on the Trump side. But I think we're just kind of counting out the establishment a little bit too much, in my opinion. But I don't know. We'll see. It's weird to say, but like, I trust Mitch McConnell. He is one of the best political operatives ever, and I think he will win out in the end because he has just the expertise and the intelligence, I believe, to do so.
And so, real quick, just to make sure I'm getting your point. So, like, McConnell, I thought handled Trump very well.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, he wasn't buddy-buddy with him, but he knew, like you said, how to get shit done. And so, I mean, obviously McConnell's remarks after the inauguration attack was very harsh towards Trump. And I'm sure if you put a gun to his head and said, do you want Trump to be the future of the party, he would say absolutely not. But my fear, and kind of coming in that camp and being more Romney side personally, it scares me that this base is so rabid Trump. Maybe that disappears without him having as much of a presence, without Twitter, without being the president of the United States. But I think the mainstream McConnell wouldn't want Trump, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant when I said establishment. I meant McConnell. I meant Romney, Cheney, and then on the more Trump faction, you have like Hawley, to some degree Cotton, Cruz, and plenty of Freedom Caucus guys over in the House. Yes, I agree that the people behind Trump are highly dedicated and highly, impacted by his whatever he's doing. I'm sure he will come back and be in politics in some way. I really don't think he's going to run again. That's just my personal take. I think he will create some kind of media company instead. But I do see a very interesting Republican primary, and but I think that the McConnell handled Trump very well. McCarthy has definitely been much closer than McConnell this whole time. But I think what McConnell said, I believe that what McConnell said after January 6th is what he believes and what he's going to continue to fight for, and whether or not we see it, it's probably what's going to happen, because I think he pretty much always gets his way.
I think that there's just an understanding too that regardless of what Donald Trump decides to do in 4 years, whether it be run or do something media related, regardless of what he decides, politicians are right now handling how to deal with him being who he is and who he has been. And so regardless of whether he runs or not, these people continue to have to, deal with that proposition of him always being around. It's something that everybody's pretty much, come to terms with for how they're going to communicate, whether or not they agree or disagree with him. I think that's going to be something that, remains to be a huge talking point for, the next 4 years and maybe even beyond.
All right. If anyone has nothing to add there, if you do, cut me off. If not, we're going to roll on to Nolan. Thank you for waiting patiently, my man. We're getting also around 10:18 here Central Time. Going to cut this off, sometime between 10:30 and 11, because I can tell that I think Riley and Brennan are getting tired. So let's just, make good use of their time in the meantime and try to get through as many more questions as possible.
Appreciate it, Mike, and everybody who put this whole thing together. Anyway, so since Slater mentioned hemp and cannabis, I figured this would be a good opportunity to try to gauge the sentiment of, the
the federal government on legalizing. And the reason I ask that is because I work for a hedge fund, manage, long-term portfolios and intraday trade. And it's pretty obvious that the public's interest, is to legalize it, but it's not very clear what the tone of the decision makers is. So I was just curious if you could kind of shed some light on that.
Before I let them go, from the perspective of the federal government, I do have to take here. From the cannabis company that I work at, we have a pretty large compliance team, and a couple of the heads of it worked for a number of the biggest campaign, the biggest names in Democratic politics in the last 20 years, but I won't say who. And they seem to think that it very well should be happening here very soon. Is the best I got.
Awesome. Well, that's good.
I would say we're closer than we are farther, similar to Slater. I think we're well on our way. Do I know that it'll happen in the next couple years? Perhaps not, but is it coming? Yeah. I don't think that there's enough sentiment against it to stop it from happening, especially under democratic rule. Especially, I guess, in my opinion, I think where the legalization will be most likely to happen will be within the criminal justice system, and that's just because that's been sparking so much, with just how many black men that we put in prisons every year and have kept there for so long for petty crimes, is absolutely ridiculous. And so I think with Democrats in power, because marijuana has such a big role to play, I think that might end up being the instigator for legalization. I don't know that will happen, but it's an idea, I guess.
Yeah, right. So in theory, what would it take for them to be willing to legalize it? And, what do you think a theoretical process or path to completion would look like, behind closed doors and in front of the public?
Riley might have a better response to that, policy-wise.
Policy-wise, it's pretty similar to just how I wouldn't change it from any other, major policy change that we've had in the past 20 years. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of bills, markups, committee meetings, amendments, debate. But at the same time, I will say, just on the Republican side, I still see a lot of opposition. I don't think this would be something that would get a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate unless there is a change in the composition of House and Senate, or the, dismantling of the filibuster for another reason. I could see marijuana being something that does get pushed through in the next year and a half, but a year and a half is a very, very quick timeline, in my opinion.
Is there really any, there's got to be, I'm assuming, pushback on that, on legalizing it federally? If so, what is the pushback at this point?
Oh my goodness, you boys don't know what the pushback against marijuana legalization is.
Oh no, only this boy. Do not let me speak for every boy here.
I'm pretty sure everybody smokes weed, right?
Yeah, I get that, but
it's more tax dollars for campaigns.
There is a very large pushback in the Republican Party.
When compared to alcohol, I don't know. I think it's becoming. Obviously, stigmatized very quickly in every constituency or every area that it gets legalized in, and it's becoming really normal. It's becoming like drinking a cocktail or something with your friends. And honestly, when you look at the long term,
when you talk to grandparents, Slater, Slater, your grandparents might be cool, but the average grandparent is not having their mind changed by these cool
fair enough,
graphic.
but I guess I'm just saying the information is getting out there, and the fact of the matter is cannabis is a much healthier vice alternative to drinking or nicotine.
I absolutely agree, but I'm just saying
it's the devil's lettuce, Slater.
Like, if you look at a cross-section of 65 plus, they're not being enticed by those cool advertisements for hemp-infused drinks or CBD and, like, how that's, how it's trendy nowadays, or, like, smoking out of a pen is less harmful on your lungs, or easier to do, more accessible. Like, those kinds of things aren't tailored towards the largest voter demographic. So I think we just kind of have a skewed view at our age and in our social circles where smoking weed is completely normal, acceptable.
Quite possibly, but I do see more and more 45, 50-year-olds dabbing, smoking, doing a lot of that stuff publicly and at dinner parties and such. And granted, a lot of it's really
in California.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's. I mean, you're going to be very hard to find. It's going to be hard to find someone on the stage who who offers the pushback themselves. So I think that's I like Riley bringing up these takes, but I also think it's very interesting that the same people that offer the pushback, because I think that age demographic really is the main demographic who is still pushing back. This is the same fucking demographic who is rubbing radon paint all over their body and poisoning themselves.
In airplanes, like smoking cigarettes in flying tubes in the sky.
Like the cigarette ads for the pregnant woman to take the edge off. Like that's the same generation who's offering the pushback here.
Right. How many more states? How many more states need to legalize it? Like before the Fed just says, okay, fuck it.
Well, I mean, I guess another question would be, how did a state even legalize it with it being federally illegal? Like, how did they let that happen?
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure if the Fed stepped in and said, like, actually, no, y'all can't do that, then they wouldn't be able to do it. I think the Fed, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Fed's just, like, turning a blind eye, even as it's with
actually, for a while in the California, mostly medical market, when it was really only legal medically, there were a lot of legal operations at the state level that were rated for 5 years, and only 3, 4, 5 years ago did that really stop happening as a lot more official licensing requirements have come out, and they've cleansed a lot of the more sketchy operations. But yeah, the Fed did take it was a lot of DEA raids and federal action for a long time because they didn't approve of it, and a lot of the operations were damn sketchy.
So they're already essentially regulating it, but they could regulate it, under much more of their control.
Yeah, and now that it is regulated in California, I mean, they've relinquished that control. No one's getting raided in 2021. That would be absurd.
I think it's just also, this is a good example of, this is one way to put it, the federalism and small more local control, state governments, as long as it doesn't preempt a federal law, which obviously this does, but there is a kind of, sounds like a MOU, like that they're now not going to be raiding or enforcing their federal policy, but that's at least one argument. The libertarian argument, I forget, Travis is libertarian.
Well, he runs the premier libertarian club.
Shout out, Mike.
Admitted that a lot of them were crazy earlier.
Isn't it like a double-edged sword? Because, liberals naturally, big government, conservatives, small government, and then you have all these liberal states who took the bull by the horns and was like, nah, we're doing small government on this one. We're making the states move. And then the feds, well, Slater pointed out that they were coming in, but they could have publicly said, like, this isn't going to fly and we're stopping this, other than just sending in the DEA, because obviously it wasn't going to stop. So why didn't, anyone take a big stance on it? I feel like it's an act of, like, low-key civil war, being like, screw you, federal government, we're out.
Yeah.
I think it's a losing issue.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think it's a losing issue, and maybe Riley or Brendan or Sean has, some insight here, but I feel like there could also be pushback, not only from that old demographic, now that I think about it, but from the states where it's already legalized, right? When it first got legalized back in, I think, 2012, you saw Denver and the Colorado economy just get booming right away. And people started, they attracted a lot of tourists, people who wanted to go to Colorado because Colorado's chill. You can blaze up there. I know a lot of us also went to school in Texas who are up here right now. When I came from Illinois and I went to Texas, let me tell y'all, spoiler alert, the weed in Texas is trash. And it was. It's getting better. It's getting better now. But I could definitely see
from Colorado.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's getting shipped in from the states where it is legal. But you saw a lot of tourist attraction in Colorado and the states where it was legal in the beginning, and now as it becomes more saturated, I feel like, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I could be talking on ass too, but I feel like the tourist level has got to be dying down a bit as well as people who are moving there for that reason.
Well, also, we haven't brought up the fact that, the drug business is underground and above ground, like billions and billions of dollars. And I don't expect you guys to answer this, even if you knew, because that would be pretty dumb to answer. But how about the cartels, right? The cartels phoning in the U.S. government, like, yo, we'll throttle back on fentanyl and heroin coming over the border if you keep marijuana illegal, so we can keep running that side of our business. But if you make it legal, we're going full steam fentanyl, cocaine, like, you're not going to stop it. And those are the drugs that kill people. So, anyone have any thoughts on that?
I will say one thing. I don't know. I can't speculate on it if any of that is happening. I have no idea. But as far as cannabis legalization goes, I think a society where cannabis is fully legalized, regulated, and fairly taxed is a society that's going to have experienced massive economic growth and job creation, much healthier general citizens converting from alcoholics to smoking weed instead, way less long-term health defects, drunk driving, accidents, etc. And as more and more governments see this happening in areas that have legalized it over time, I think it would just be stupid not to. It's a win for everybody except people that think weed is the devil's lettuce.
Agreed, and to the point of the other drugs, I think just because they increase the supply isn't going to increase people's use, Just because the dispensary gets a lot more weed doesn't mean I'm going to smoke more weed.
That's kind of where I was going to go with that, too, is I think, actually, weed will have people casually smoking weed and not being normalized will lead to probably less drug addicts turning to worse drugs like that and making the cartel business grow.
And back kind of to the topic of legalization, so considering the Fed is, basically turning a blind eye to everything, then it kind of seems that the only barrier for these, big, distribution and cultivation companies, etc., seems like the main barrier is banking. And I know recently, they just, I don't know if they introduced it or some sort of bill to allow the banks to do business with these companies.
Yeah, the Safe Banking Act.
So what's kind of your speculation on that? You think that will be passed at all, or?
I think that definitely.
What's kind of the time frame?
Luckily, at a state level, though, the market has already adjusted and created credit unions that can perform all the functions of a normal bank for cannabis businesses. That's a pretty recent thing of like the last year, but
but they don't have as much capital as Goldman Sachs. You know what I mean? Like if these companies want to grow from 4 billion to 20 billion, they're going to need a lot more than just some union. They're going to need some Goldman Sachs money, some JPM, the large institutions.
And it's not just.
I think do anything with. Likely going to rely on private investors more than banks for a long time.
I also think it's interesting to note that it's not just banks that are getting, inadvertently caught with these issues with the federal government having marijuana being illegal. Is, if you're a like a soil company or a Home Depot or something, like technically if you're aiding and abetting a criminal activity of growing marijuana,
that there's also a possibility of you getting in trouble for that, which I think is really weird. But there's some.
Wait, so if I sell high, whatever voltage or whatever lights, and the marijuana industry happens to be favorable to the lights that I sell, I could go to jail.
Yeah, I don't think that's true.
You wouldn't go, there's a lot of caveats and a lot of liability stuff, but for a small company that say is created and say 98% of their customer base is from a local weed production company or something, there is a case to be made in federal court that they are aiding and abetting.
So my family, we lease both.
It hasn't happened because the feds haven't enforced that, but it's just a technicality.
But yeah, it's interesting.
Because the Safe Banking Act is would effectively end that loophole as well, which is a good thing because those companies shouldn't be liable. But why should banks be liable either? But technically, banks have all these extra reporting regulations because they have to alert the federal government if there's any fishy activity happening in their bankrolls. So that's why they get the most press on this issue.
And honestly, I think the more important issue, though, than even allowing banking or even being enforced on these days, it's not even that much of an issue if you're doing things compliantly these days for cannabis business. But the most limiting thing is just the extremely high taxation currently. That is really the reason why. Some of the stats behind this are there are 12.5 million pounds of legally licensed produced cannabis in California every year. Only 2.5 million of those are consumed in California because the taxes are absurdly high, at least in the legal market. The rest of that goes out of state or into our black markets here, finds its way out in ghost distributions sold from a licensed facility to a non-licensed facility. And if we really want to stop a lot of that drug trade, we have to allow these dispensaries to be able to actually compete with drug dealers on the street. Right now, it's a 5x markup. It's absurd.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Coming from a state where we just legalized marijuana last year, I remember when it was going through committee, we were discussing some of the tax rates and things like that. And, obviously Illinois is, we have our budget issues, and there were some expectations that this might help close some of those gaps for us, which is insane because it's way too much of a deficit, but that's another issue. Yeah, but the tax rates are just absolutely ridiculous, and it's asinine to expect people to pay for, state-regulated marijuana at a much higher price than, something they can buy in the streets, right? I certainly think that if there's ever to be success out of, state-sponsored marijuana and things like that, the tax rates just need to be more friendly for consumers.
You look at, there's got to be a happy medium, and I do want to let Tobin speak in a second as well, because I know he was trying to ask a question and
Sorry,
got
Tobin,
caught
I
off.
definitely kind of cut you off there. I had a lot to say about weed.
You're looking at it, it's because it's so new, and I'm sure they anticipated something like this happening. It's a matter of how much can or should the government be involved here? And in capitalism, the government's not supposed to really step into anything. And conservatives will make that argument all the time. But we're seeing in Colorado what the big issue was, and if it's a consumer, it's great in Colorado, right? You've got anyone who wanted to open up a weed dispensary and a grow op or whatever. For the most part, in the beginning, they could. As long as you had the funds to do so, you could do it, and there wasn't a big barrier. And what that did is it drove, it's just the race to the bottom. There's so much supply that people are just undercutting everyone's prices. They're all selling these high quality product, but they're just undercutting each other and driving. Yeah, you can grow your own, and you're driving the price down. And because of that, these business owners were going out of business left and right, and it's still happening today because the government's just not involved there. But then you look at Illinois, who I thought in the beginning handled it the right way, where they didn't allow for the supply to, grow too large because they had this lottery in the beginning. I think it was something like 20 bids would get approved in the beginning, and then slowly they'd add more. but they got so involved that not only did they, create this bottleneck of who could start a dispensary and who couldn't, who could sort of grow out but who couldn't, they also, like Sean mentioned, brought in these just absolutely outrageous taxes where you have people like me who, again, I say this on the internet every day, it doesn't matter to me, enjoy their weed. They enjoy good weed, but at the same time, I can get that same quality weed on the street for half the price that I have to go pay in a dispensary just because Illinois wants to stick their hand in my pocket.
Yeah, I think what California has actually done a really good job of, a little differently, has we really have not opened it up as a free market at all, which has been negative in some ways because it's been unfair to smaller business owners that can't afford to pay massive hundreds of thousands of dollars in compliance costs to upstart the business. But creating those barriers to entry has definitely whittled down the amount of entrance into the market and made them a lot higher quality in general. And all those higher quality businesses have kind of worked together to create really strong brands that customers are really connecting with and create really strong followings of growers that have specific strains and growing styles that customers are really starting to take account of and separate the industry from street dealing, really, and make it a real experience. But we need to change the taxes for sure. While we have done a good job of growing the market, we need to change the taxes, or it'll never be able to compete.
Right. And let me go ahead and just put a bookmark there so I can let Tobin ask his question.
Hey, thanks. So I was just going to say one more thing about the weed, I guess. So my family, we actually lease both land and buildings to people that are in the industry distributing and growing. So we had, obviously, because it's still federally illegal at some levels. So that was something concerning. So we did a lot of work with our attorney to try to understand, what we were getting into, because it was a great opportunity for money, but, might be somewhat illegal. So fortunately, the guys we're involved with now, they're all medical, so we don't have to worry about anything whatsoever. But the interesting thing is you don't see these crazy DEA raids, but that because when people hear law enforcement or getting in trouble for something, you imagine a police officer putting someone in cuffs. But there are a lot of other ways that being involved in marijuana can really screw you because it's federally illegal. For instance, if you've ever smoked weed, if you have a marijuana card or anything on record to indicate you're involved with weed or you smoke it or whatever, you're ineligible to own a firearm. You are federally ineligible, which to some people it doesn't matter, but to a lot of people it does. So that's just one example. Also, federal aid. You are now disqualified from any federal aid in any capacity. Any federal program, you are disqualified. You are a federal felon.
I don't know.
So,
a lot of my friends worked in the cannabis industry before and then had unemployment. They were disqualified from that.
Well, they could be. I mean, I suppose, someone didn't decide to, hey, let's cross-reference all medical cards with unemployment benefits, but they could. I mean, they could. They don't.
Yeah, it's definitely scary.
And the other thing is also medical versus recreational. Again, medical doesn't disqualify you, but recreational does. So that's another thing. Although medical still disqualifies you from firearm ownership, which is just interesting caveat there.
Tobin, that's crazy. I had no idea and just looked it up, and yeah, I mean, it seems like it's totally illegal. But I guess you just don't have to submit to a drug test before you buy a gun. But theoretically, they could do that and take away a ton of guns. That's wild. I had no idea.
Exactly. So my actual question, though, for Brendan and Riley, because we have these such great resources here. We see on TV shows and stuff. I'm thinking Succession specifically, but there's this great collusion between powerful businesses like news and politicians. Hey, don't run this story. Do run this story. Hey, spit out some dirt about this person, or alternatively, kind of backroom. They talk about the military political industrial complex a lot. How real is that? Is there really this deep collusion between private companies and individual officials, not just like, hey, there's a new law, you have to follow it, but like, do me a favor because I'm a powerful government official sort of thing.
Yeah, I think this is definitely more me on the comms side. When you are an individual that's not necessarily powerful yet, like a beginning congressman, you have a lot of trouble getting any of your like policies into newspapers, especially national ones. But you might be able to get them into local papers, etc. So when you're on like a pretty low power level, and I feel like you're probably referencing the people who actually have the power, but just so you know, like the low power people really aren't able to interact with the media in these ways that maybe are taking over all of our issues. But I guess where I find that media hits politics is like where money is speech, I guess I would say. And because news media can be entertainment, like Fox is literally defined as entertainment, they can do with that what they please. This is going to kind of divert back to Citizens United, and I just find this interesting as an aside, but like money is speech, speech is the press, right? And so even if you weren't raising a bunch of money to donate it to a political campaign, you could buy a newspaper or use your newspaper to disseminate information that would do the exact same thing. So that's just a complete aside. Sorry, I know that wasn't your question. But on your question, the collusion between politics and news, I don't think that it's really possible to change the narrative, because if you are someone who is like the majority leader or the speaker or something like that, you are gonna get shat on for anything that you fuck up on. You know, like you may be given priority for getting information out, but the idea that like a newspaper wouldn't run something at this point in our lives is like a little ridiculous. Like you would have to be such a nice person on a comms team. Like you would have to be the comms director of the century and know every single person at every single news place just to make sure that like your member didn't have something bad placed about them. So like on the one hand, really hard to get bad things taken down. On the other hand, in order to be able to like promote anything, you really do have to build a relationship. So I think it's hard for there to be that much collusion, I guess I would say. Yeah, let me know if you have more to that, because I'll keep going.
No, that was pretty good. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
I don't want to cut anyone off. I thought someone was about to talk, but I do want to make sure we get to at least Tap. I think he rose his hand. I don't remember if Mike had a question, if he already asked it. Mike, did you have a question earlier? Mike must be sleeping. Tap, did you have a question? You rose your hand. Must be sleeping too. I don't know. Does anyone else have any other questions that they want us to go over while we have our guests here?
Especially the people just in the crowd.
Yeah, if anyone in the crowd has any questions, raise your hand. We'll call you up here. What was that?
Tap's not sleeping anymore.
Tap, do you have something?
Mike, too. I had a question a little while back, but it was covered.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't got a question. I'm just listening to it.
Oh, no worries. Just want to make sure we get to everyone. Shoot, I had a question earlier now I forgot it. Trying to prioritize the peeps. Yeah, if anyone in the crowd has a question in the meantime, we'll do a hard stop here at 11 o'clock Central. So that's coming up in 13 minutes. We can kind of wind down over here, make sure we get all of our bases covered. It sounds like there's a lot of interest in this room, from at least what I picked up on, and having a discussion in the future as well on marijuana and what goes on in that industry. So If you guys are interested in that, we can put something together. And I know Slater, it sounds like Tobin might be a valuable resource there. I know Nolan's a great resource there as well, where we would be able to get, I think, some other great guests in here to talk on the topic. Mm-hmm.
I took a look at the crowd, and I saw that our friend Mark was sitting down there, and I know he always has something great to say. So I invited him up to speak, and lucky for us, he came up here. So I'm going to pass it on over to him. Mark, get some insight from what's in his head. Could be anything.
Well, there's always something going on in my head, but I don't want to say anything stupid, especially because it's going to be on the internet. But I will say I do appreciate all the information that I've taken in from this. I've actually been listening for since you guys started on my whole drive home and everything. And even when I got home, I just continued listening, and I thought everything was very interesting. I did want to speak when you guys were talking about weed, because I like that stuff, but
well, we can wrap up with a weed conversation if you want to speak on that. If no one has any other political questions.
Yeah, and real quick, if you guys do want to speak, I'm telling you will not sound stupid. And if you do sound stupid, we'll tell you sound stupid, and then we'll send you back. Nobody will remember, so it's not a problem.
It's all right. I sound stupid for 3 hours, and I'm okay with it. So if you guys sound stupid for 30 seconds, that's no harm, no foul. Do you have anything you want to say about weed?
Time,
Oh, you're not wasting time. We're just friends up here conversing about cool stuff. We got someone. Come on down.
What's up, Mike? I heard cool stuff.
Yep.
I want to join in.
All right, awesome. You have anything or any questions? You have any cool stuff that you want to bring up?
I would love to know, because I just joined in 2 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know what would be the top 3 takeaways from this conversation that you would want somebody to go away with, as far as knowledge and.
Ooh, good question. So I've been more hands off. I've been more hands off on in this conversation, and letting our guests speak, because they're the ones who are. I think they should have the floor for it. So why don't we pass that question to Riley, Brennan, and Sean on what their key takeaways are.
Mike?
I have a lot of takeaways, but I'm still wrapping my head around everything over here.
You weren't listening to all the things I was saying, Mike?
You weren't listening to
Oh
all
my
the
God.
stuff that Riley
Oh my God, I love you guys.
I just think that y'all have way more valuable insight to share in our last 9 minutes here than my takeaways, because my takeaway is going to gravitate towards weed. My one takeaway, that's how my brain works. Sorry, guys. Another takeaway was a comment Brennan made, towards the beginning, that people's voices don't really matter as much as they think they do. In terms of when they call their local congresspeople. It really does take a group effort, and I think that kind of sparked some interesting dialogue in my head, but I didn't want to lead us down the conversation of, cancel culture is very, very similar to that right now, right? Where it's not getting a group to call your local congressman and complain about something. It's people who are saying, if we all come together and complain about something that someone did, this public figure did or whoever did 10 years ago, we can get them canceled. We can ruin their life forever. So they call and they say, oh my God, Mike works for, well, fortunately I work for myself. So one of these days, I contemplate firing myself every day. I'm, pain in the ass as an employee, and I'm the worst boss ever. But, if I had an actual boss, they could call them and they could say, oh my God, well, if you saw what Mike did when he was 12, did you see this? How he talked to this girl on Facebook when he was 12 or MySpace or whatever? That's the same kind of groupthink that, Brendan was kind of explaining, but her way is like this, I guess, quote unquote, civilized way of calling your local congressperson to make a change, not just, wasting your time and resources to bitch about one person who, probably isn't relevant if you're not bitching about them.
Yeah, I guess one of the takeaways I got was your voice matters, but you really need to do like a full court press if you're gonna go for it. Like a simple
email being mad is not going to cut it. And then, you gotta be active in your local government. It's the most important. So that was the main takeaway that I've gotten thus far.
That's true.
All right, I spoke for a little bit. Riley, Brennan, Sean, what would your key takeaways be from our discussion? Because we've talked for about almost 2.5 hours now, so we've got to have some takeaways here.
Yeah, I can go just with some closing thoughts. I think the one thing that I do always like to express about what actually happens behind closed doors is that there is a lot more bipartisanship than what is expressed on the media, and it is a lot more, there's a lot more things in common than you think. Whether or not those actually get passed is not necessarily directly related to the political will of constituents and or politicians, but more so the system and how bills become law, being such a complicated system, as Sean was pointing out, with amendments, with committee markups, all of that. It's just a slow-moving process, and it was designed to be that way. And I think that's another argument. We're not going to go into the filibuster now, but that's one argument that I do find important with it is, that this stuff is meant to be thoughtfully implemented and thoughtfully changed. If you're going to be changing a law, it should be, thought about from all sides. So there is a lot of benefit to lobbyists, to the different parties and bipartisanship, because it creates a better product rather than just having your blinders on and getting confirmation bias within your party. With a partisan bill, you might miss something and it might not be the best bill, because as we've seen in more recent elections that go around 50-50 or within 5 percentage points of that, if you're governing in a majoritarianism, in a majoritarian way, where you're taking the will of 50% of the people approximately and implementing that control on, or that way of thought on 100% of the people, they're not going to respond positively. And a more moderate, slow-changing, incremental, bipartisan way forward is at least in my perspective the best way to go forward. And I'm sure that other people would tell me that I'm completely wrong, but that is how I see it, and that's why I'm effective in the job that I do. So I think bipartisanship and all the different factors that we have that makes government slow actually makes it better.
You're a genius.
I don't want to cut off Brennan or Sean if they had answers here, but I did finally remember my question, and it's perfect for the last 5 minutes of the conversation. Wish we had more time for it, but y'all, I'm not sure where you're based, Riley, but I know, Brennan, I think you're both from California, if I'm not mistaken. Can you?
Yeah, we're both in DC, so it's pretty late here.
Oh, great. Even better. So can y'all enlighten us, since you're even closer to home than I thought, on what the hell's going on in San Francisco with Gavin Newsom?
Oh man. Well, I mean, if you want to take like the angry side, Riley, and I can
incompetence.
I mean, yeah, sure. Slater's there. It's incompetence, and he's been really messing up. He hasn't been the leader that I think a lot of people wanted him to be. I mean, I didn't necessarily want him to be a leader from the beginning because he cheated on his wife like a MFer. But that, I guess that's besides the point. But right now what people are doing is they've basically come together, right? And they've gotten enough signatures and sent them up to make sure that all the signatures are verified or whatever. And then at which point they can say, hey, we want to recall your governorship, which is kind of wild, but can happen. And I'm interested to see what happens, because heck, who knows who we can get in there? I don't know. I'm more like jazzed by this than anything else.
Chamath.
Oh man, you got the Chamath fanboys in here, myself included. I actually don't want Chamath to be governor, might I say, just because I want him to be focused on the businesses that I'm invested in, that he helps run. So
Those are your businesses, my friend.
I'm a co-owner of those businesses.
You are a co-owner.
I'm a co-owner of 3 publicly traded companies.
Ooh.
Can I just jump in there real quick? Funny enough, thanks for inviting me up to the stage. I was actually going to comment on how to get in touch with your representatives from the campaign side of things. So anyone in the room who doesn't feel hopelessly depressed that they can't get through to their member of Congress. A good way is showing up at the campaign office if they have lower seniority, of course, your local representative, and showing you have some skin in the game and that you're volunteering some time and you actually want to affect change, and you can grab them when they come into the campaign office and have a conversation with them. I've directed many people to do that, and they've been quite successful with that, and the members of Congress that I've worked with have always been very receptive to people who are actually there volunteering in the campaign office and listening to their concerns. So that's a great way to do it. So, but I just hosted a room, funny enough, yesterday on the topic of the recall with Gavin Newsom, with Gary South, who is Newsom's former political advisor when he ran in 2008, as well as Gray Davis's campaign manager during the recall and when he was running successfully for governor the first time. And it's a very interesting thing that's happening here because, or should I say in California, because we see a swell of Republicans who are actually signing the ballots. They turned in 2.1 million signatures, which was 600,000 above the signature requirement. But you still see in the polls that Newsom still has the support there to push back against any of the attempt to really recall it. So more than likely by the April 29th deadline, the signatures will be verified. There will be a recall election. It will not be successful. Gavin Newsom will more than likely stay in power. And the more money that's poured in by Republican groups, Gary South actually made this point yesterday, it actually makes the point better for the Democrats that it is a Republican effort to get rid of a democratically elected governor 1 year before his term expires. So it's a massive waste of money, a massive waste of time. And that's all I have to say.
Richard, you can't sit in the crowd next time. You got to raise your hand sooner, because that is just exactly the knowledge we need on stage. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Great debate, because I think Riley's about to open up on you.
Riley, don't hold back, Riley.
I think it's a valiant effort, more so than just a waste of time by Republicans. The things that have happened in California over the last year have been absolutely devastating to people, and they have no recourse. But then the signature comes around, and there's a possibility to recall the person that is personally causing a lot of the damage economically, financially, mentally to their well-being. I don't think that you can disseminate that down to just being a Republican talking piece against a democratically elected governor.
You know what? And I am no fan of Gavin Newsom. I was just representing what Gary had said on the call.
I do agree it will be a waste of money. But
it will be a waste of money. It won't be successful.
There's been a lot of waste of money over the past 4 years.
I mean,
pretty sure California paid like $64,000 per tent in the last bill that they signed, giving out 247 tents to the homeless. So talk about a waste of money.
Yeah.
Well, they're very good at it.
I think the math on it was $60,000 a tent or something like that. How is that even possible? Where did that go to?
Or a bullet train that costs $12 billion a mile or whatever it is. Yeah, California is very effective at wasting money.
They built a 3-page COVID website that cost $3 million. I build websites. I own a marketing company. I could have done that website for $500.
Sounds like people are getting their backs scratched.
But it is the security as well for government websites. Does have to be mentioned.
I got SSL, baby.
Oh, as a cybersecurity company owner, hardly. They don't do any of their own security. They pay private companies to do it, and those private companies can do it for so cheap. They just go, honestly, hardly an exaggeration, but you could practically go to Squarespace or a certified, vendor, and they will be able to provide the security the government needs. It's a joke. So whoever said it was right. someone's back is getting scratched.
Yeah, 100%.
Thanks, Tobin. Thank you.
I'm sure you must have enjoyed when it was revealed about a month and a half ago that the entire Department of State website was built using WordPress with a bunch of plugins that were not secure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I love WordPress.
Crazy.
Oh, WordPress is great. They got a plugin for everything, but like Richard just pointed out, a lot of them are not secure, and they're very easy to. They put your website at risk. That's.
I do just want to point out real quick also that the federal government, when they make supplemental, like the legislative branch we have to appropriate our own funding for the Hill staffers, and then we obviously appropriate funding for all of the different agencies, and that is 1,000% taxpayer dollars. So it's not very graciously spent or appropriated. But when it is, so our technology is absolutely ridiculously outdated. And whenever there was a supplement, there was like a 2 million or 2 billion, I can't remember, amount appropriated in CARES Act for supplemental funding for the Hill to be able to work from home and work remotely and have all of that systems figured out. And, there was this huge uproar because people thought that Congress was raising their salary during the beginning of COVID. But it's like, no, Hill staffers didn't have personal or work laptops or work phones where they could securely access our VPNs, which is so ridiculous. But anytime that you're giving more money to government, or federal agencies, people think that it's just people getting raises, but in actuality, these taxes, I think it is a good thing for cybersecurity and increasing security of the federal government, but it doesn't appear that way.
Yeah, I have to say, from a technology standpoint, Russia, China, these other countries like that, they got it right in the sense that they have just completely revamped their their internal infrastructure in terms of technology and their cyber warfare, which is terrifying and it needs to be paid more attention to. But there was just an article. I live right outside of San Francisco. They are still using the same architecture submission system as they did in the 1800s. The organization system is the same that was set up by the previous Spanish government and then briefly the Mexican government. They're using the same system still, literally hundreds of years old, and we haven't updated the organizational system. It's madness.
I think it's just so interesting because half the reason that we don't do that is because it looks bad to be quote unquote wasting taxpayer dollars on things like that. I think that's a very interesting topic to think about in American political culture. It's we don't want to be spending money on the government because we picture the government as being elite, when in actuality, I think that private entities are usually more well off than government. But
for reference, I make $35,000 a year.
I work
about 90 hours a week.
It doesn't sound like you're getting your back scratched.
No, but you're welcome because taxes.
Great, yeah, thank you for my wages. Appreciate it.
It's unfortunate because we should be at the pinnacle of technology, and especially San Francisco, you got all that crap going on, and you have the most brilliant minds in the country saturated into one place, and they haven't been able to figure out what to do in that area. So it sucks that everybody's wasting money and the bureaucracies and all that good stuff.
The homeless problem is it's terrible, and Austin is seeing something similar too.
They need to let the city or people in the city build housing. That's the problem. Is literally every development gets
1,000%.
Every development gets protested, and the way San Francisco works is as many citizens as they want can come up and speak for 5 minutes each. So there's an example. There was an ice cream shop trying to open up across the street from an existing ice cream shop, and there was a 30-hour debate about whether or not it should be able to open up across the street because there's already another ice cream shop there. Are you kidding? That is just the problem with San Francisco right now, and every single low-income housing development that's not perfect, that doesn't match what the NIMBY rich people want the city to look like, gets opposed, and they don't let housing get developed, and people. That's why the homeless population keeps growing.
Is that why those two dudes who like go and talk to their local council about getting a statue of Paul Walker get to talk because anyone can go speak? You know.
Oh yeah, Chad and whoever.
Yeah.
I think that is.
Those guys are my favorite.
They're hilarious.
Those guys are hilarious.
I know Raphael just came up here. I'm not sure if he had something he wanted to add. So.
One last thing about San Francisco. The other problem is just that the DA is not prosecuting crimes.
Right.
True. He's letting murders go. What's the deal with that?
LA just brought in the former DA. Great move there.
Hey guys, this is Raphael speaking. Thanks first of all for bringing me on the stage. I had a question for those of you who are in California. I think one of you had brought up the homelessness issue that has become so pervasive in the San Francisco area. A lot of those politics, or I don't know what I would attribute to the problem creating sort of like a spillover effect in the Austin area. I forgot who it was that brought it up, but I think it's even worse now in Austin.
Oh,
but
it's terrible.
I wanted to ask you guys, those of you who are in California, if you could speak on the effectiveness of the, I don't know what it's called specifically, but where you guys are essentially allowed to vote on certain propositions that I think are more reflective of like direct democracy, and whether or not that's had a net benefit or if that hasn't really amounted to much at all.
I say it's useless, and in several occasions, and I'll let Brennan and Riley talk after. They probably know more than me, but I know for certain that on several occasions people have voted on the proposition. Let's say they vote yes for the proposition. The government goes, oh, that's very interesting, and then they do the opposite. So I really don't think they're particularly effective, but that's just me. I'll let the experts talk.
I don't know too much about propositions, to be fair, but I think I would take the opposite view. I'm not sure exactly how effective they are necessarily, but I think it's interesting and important to gauge public interest on those matters. And again, just a call out to educate yourself on local initiatives.
Yeah, I would say there's just like a lot of pros and cons to that. Like, obviously,
We're talking about this in another room at some point, but I think I take the opposite opinion that those referendums really just aren't a good way to decide things, right? Because most of the people voting, to Riley's point, simply just don't have the time or expertise to devote to really learn about the issue in as much depth as an elected representative would, right? It's their full-time job to do so, but your average voter just doesn't have that time or expertise, so you're just going to get a worse outcome, in my mind, than leaving it to the elected representatives who have to make good choices with good outcomes. Otherwise, they're not going to get reelected, right? For most of the population, they don't have much skin in the game and reason to really look into this stuff. So I don't think the referendums.
And I'm going to let Brennan weigh in a second now. I've been threatening the hard stop now for like an hour. 11:15, I'm really going to do the hard stop, but I do want to continue this conversation just another day. I wish that we had 3 hours of this because this is very healthy dialogue. Make sure y'all go and tap on that greenhouse at the top. Teach us something cool so you can join in our future discussions, and we can plan another discussion around politics, bring Brennan and Riley and Sean, any of y'all back who want to speak on this, because this has been great, and I feel bad having cut it off, but I know they are on the East Coast, I'm Central. It's about to be 12:15, and I know they've got work in the morning.
Also, we'll have a brief discussion after in our Discord. Come on down if you want to keep speaking. You can find the Discord link in Mike's bio on Instagram.
Yep, if you click on my bio, I've got the explanation or the directions in there. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it'll take you all 2 seconds. And yeah, we put our topic recommendations in there, proposals for all future weeks. We do this every Wednesday. We've been doing it at 9. This week we did it at 8:30. I think we might hold 8:30 again because we needed enough time to speak on this. But yeah, let us know if y'all want to do another political discussion because we would definitely love to have one.
Cool. Yeah, I'm always down. I'm sure a lot of people here would like to do that too. I think also I would probably just concur with Riley and Travis. I think you were the one who spoke, just to make things easy. The one point that I would make in addition is like, obviously all of this money is being spent in the first place on the campaign in general. And then in California, when I was working on a campaign, I started watching TV for like the first time ever and actually seeing these commercials that I just never see. And I realized how much propaganda there is just like coming at voters. And I kind of started to feel bad because like these people are never going to actually read anything about these bills. They're only going to be told like whether or not to vote for one, and like one is pro, one commercial's pro, and the next one's against, and they're back to back. And one is like an Uber driver saying, "Please vote for this," and the other one's saying like is another Uber person who's like, "Please don't vote for this." And so they have no idea what's going on, and they think that they're going to help somebody. And a lot of the bills are written backwards. So yeah, I agree. I think on the one hand, you want to give people power and you want to put it in their hands, but like people don't know how to wield it, which is highly unfortunate. So
Brennan,
that's the matter.
I'm see the time 9:14. It'll be really brief. I mentioned this in the Discord as well, or I alluded to it more so. I think what you just said is like times 10,000 when it comes to scientific issues or environmental policy.
Yes.
It is complex. I've done biology and chemistry. I studied both for 4 years now, and I still can't understand some of these, studies and impact reports. It is so complicated. I think it's just so hard when science and policy intersect.
Yes, exactly. So definitely an interesting topic. Let's pull it back sometime soon. But yeah, it's midnight 15.
If you couldn't get enough of the conversation, we do post this to YouTube. The beginning was super awesome. I was engaged. It's been like 3 hours, and I didn't really zone out. And sometimes, you people lose me. So this was awesome. Thanks, Brennan. Thanks, Riley.
Happy to be here.
Thank you guys.
Yep.
We'd
So
love to do this again.
We'll have this on YouTube, ASAP. I'm going to get, this over to our video editor. He'll get it back to me ASAP. He lives in Ireland. He's a good buddy, but he just moved out there. So we've got a little bit of a time gap. We're going to try to get it up by the end of the week, though. Also, next week's episode, Tobin, I'm coming to San Francisco for the first time. Then driving right down to SLO to hang out with Slater, dude. But
oh yeah, we're gonna do a combo episode, dude.
Oh yeah,
Wait,
dude.
No kidding, that's super cool.
Yeah, dude. Let's link up.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's all the time we've got tonight. Again, I know we've said hard stop a million times, but yeah, I do appreciate Brennan, Riley, Sean. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for offering your wisdom and your insight that we don't get to see every day, that the news does not portray for us. Raphael, Richard, thank you as well. Richard, I wish you raised your hand earlier because we would have definitely loved to have you as part of the discussion this entire time. Luke, I'll invite you up for the very end, but we are going to sign off now. Again, join the Discord, or tap the greenhouse at the top so that you can join our club and you can join any future discussions. We talk about a lot of cool shit in here, guys. More than just politics, but we would love to have this discussion continued. All right, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Thank you all so much for joining. We really do appreciate it, and we will see y'all next Wednesday.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good night, y'all. All righty. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you, everybody. Love you guys.